As our tale begins, a dark, bearded man scales the wall surrounding a manor house known as the Copper Beeches. Creeping his way across the grounds, the mysterious man stares upward at the stained glass window of the upper turret. The occupants of the estate become alarmed when their mastiff begins to bark angrily, indicating the presence of an intruder. Fearing for his life, the bearded man flees from the giant dog, retreating across the lawn and back over the wall from whence he came. And so begins the adventure of the Copper Beeches. At 221B, Dr. Watson amuses himself, jotting down a new passage in his latest chronicle. But his friend, Sherlock Holmes, harbors a dark disconcertment.
To the man who loves art for its own sake, it is frequently in its least important and lowliest manifestations that the keenest pleasure is to be derived.
Oh, if you say so, Holmes.
It is pleasant to me to observe, Watson, that you have so far grasped this truth, that in these little records of our cases which you have been good enough to draw up, and I am bound to say, occasionally embellished, that you have given prominence not so much to the many cause célèbre and sensational trials in which I have figured, but rather to those incidents which have given room for those faculties of deduction and logical synthesis, which I have made my special province.
Kind of you to say so, Holmes.
You have erred, perhaps, in attempting to put color and life into each of your statements, instead of confining yourself to placing upon record that severe reasoning from cause to effect, which is really the only notable feature about the thing.
You are always in a disputatious mood when you choose that pipe. It seems to me that I've done you full justice in the matter.
No. It is not selfishness and conceit. If I claim full justice for my art, it is because crime is common, logic is rare. Therefore, it is upon logic, rather than upon crime, that you should dwell. You have degraded what should have been a course of lectures into a series of tales.
Really, Holmes, I hardly think my poor scribblings deserve that. They have, after all, made your name a household word.
Oh, sure, my dear fellow. What do the public, the great and observant public, who can hardly tell a weed of eye's tooth or a composite of eye's left thumb, care about the finer shades of analysis and deduction? But indeed, if you are trivial, I cannot blame you. The days of the great cases are past. Man, or at least criminal man, has lost all enterprise and originality.
Oh, surely not.
I fear so. As for my little practice, it seems to be degenerating into an agency for recovering lost lead pencils and giving advice to young ladies from boarding schools.
My dear, dear friend, how can you say such a thing?
I think I have touched bottom. Finally, however, this note I had this morning marks my 0 point, I fancy.
Holmes reluctantly hands over the note upon which he has been brooding, and Watson reads it aloud. A Miss Violet Hunter is seeking advice on possible employment as a governess and will call at 10:30. Over the course of the first 7 episodes, we've become very familiar with Mr. Brett's insistence on canonical accuracy, but there were times when his love of the source material and the challenges presented to him as an actor came into conflict. To the editors of the Armchair Detective magazine, Michael Cox recalled, "Jeremy would sometimes say to me, or to the director, 'My goodness, this is a huge mouthful of words. Do I really have to say this?' I can remember, in the Copper Beeches, he says something about the great public who couldn't tell a weaver by his tooth or a compositor by his left thumb. He cut that out originally, but I said, 'Oh, it's wonderful, a marvelous illustration of Holmes' observations.' So that went back in. It was give and take, but I must admit, I respected Jeremy when he did defend the stories, and we hammered it out between us." Back at Baker Street, Holmes and Watson are joined in their sitting room by one Miss Violet Hunter.
I must confess to being somewhat puzzled by the contents of your letter, Miss Hunter. Since the matter on which you seek advice is somewhat outside my usual field of expertise.
Yes, I'm aware of that. But you will excuse my troubling you, I'm sure, since I've recently had a very strange experience.
Indeed.
As I have no parents or relations of any sort from whom I could ask advice, I thought perhaps you would be kind enough to tell me what I should do.
I shall be happy to serve you in any way I can. Pray, proceed.
Miss Hunter explains that recently she was offered a situation as governess by one Mr. Jeffro Rucastle of the Copper Beeches near Winchester. At a rate of £100 a year, she was initially enthusiastic about the position, but the strange mannerisms of Mr. Rucastle and his singular stipulation that she be willing to submit to any fads and fancies that he and his wife might command, commencing with the cutting of her lovely hair to a length quite short, created such misgivings in her that she was compelled to refuse the otherwise exceptional offer of employment.
Now, why on earth should he want you to cut your hair?
I don't know.
A very strange fad.
As you may observe, Mr. Holmes, my hair is somewhat luxuriant and a rather peculiar tint of chestnut.
And most artistic, if I may so observe.
It has been considered so. I simply couldn't think of sacrificing it in such an offhand manner.
Well, I should think not, indeed.
Oh, such was my feeling at the time. The next day, I was inclined to think that I'd made a mistake. And the day after, I was sure of it, when I received a letter from the gentleman himself. I have it here, and I will read it to you. Dear Miss Hunter, Miss Stoper has kindly given me your address, and I write from here to ask whether you have reconsidered your decision. We are willing to give £30 a quarter or £120 a year, so as to recompense you for any little inconvenience which our fads may cause you.
And your hair?
He is insistent. As regards your hair, it is no doubt a pity, especially as I could not help remarking its beauty during our short interview. But I am afraid I must remain firm upon this point, and I only hope that the increased salary may recompense you for the loss.
Will it?
My mind's made up that I will accept the offer. I thought, however, that before taking the final step, I should like to submit the whole matter for your consideration.
Well, my dear Miss Hunter, as your mind is already made up, the matter is settled. But if at any time you should find yourself in any doubt or danger...
Danger? What danger do you foresee?
It would cease to be a danger if we could define it. But at any time, day or night, a telegram will bring me down to your help.
Then that is enough.
Miss Hunter takes her leave, reassured that she has Mr. Holmes' support. But the great detective has misgivings of his own.
Well, Holmes?
I should allow no sister of mine to accept such a situation.
That night, Miss Hunter sadly resolves herself to cut her beautiful hair. But she keeps a single lock, a memento, which she packs away inside her luggage. The next day, she is accompanied to the Copper Beeches by her new employer, and upon meeting her charge, young Edward, who presents her with a gift of a recently killed bird, she is introduced to the house staff, including Mr. and Mrs. Toller. But when her employer at last shows her the surrounding property, he also issues a warning not to set foot outside the house at night, for the grounds are patrolled by a bloodthirsty mastiff named Carlo, and God help any trespasser he lays his fangs upon. In his book, A Study in Celluloid, Michael Cox reminisced about the Copper Beeches. He wrote, "The script follows Conan Doyle closely. The setting is a substantial old house near Carnforth, which came complete with sweeping staircase, linen paneling, and antique furniture. It had everything except the beeches, but we were able to add a sinister touch by saying they were dead, Miss Hunter, mostly dead." Finally, Miss Hunter is introduced to Mrs. Rucastle, who stares strangely at the young governess, insisting that she wear a very special dress in the morning, an electric blue dress. Miss Hunter reluctantly agrees. Later that evening, as Miss Hunter unpacks her luggage, she is taken aback when she unlocks one of the bureau drawers, only to find a lock of cut hair, identical to her own in length and color. She wonders to what bizarre misadventure she has succumbed.
I wonder what desperate circumstances could occasion such an appeal.
I have devised 7 separate explanations, each of which would cover the facts as far as we know them.
Oh. And which one do you favor, Holmes?
At the moment, I have no favorites. Data. I cannot make bricks without clay.
Well, it's nice to get away from the fogs of Baker Street now and again. What delightful little farms these are, don't you agree? Aren't they fresh and beautiful?
Do you know, Watson, it is one of the curses of having a mind with a turn like mine that I must look at everything with reference to my own special subject.
Well, it doesn't make the scenery any less admirable, does it?
You look at these scattered houses and you are impressed by their beauty. I look at them, and the only thought which comes to me is a feeling of their isolation and of the impunity with which crime may be committed.
Good heavens. Who would associate crime with these dear old homesteads?
They always fill me with a certain horror. It is my belief, Watson, founded upon my experience, that the lowest and vilest alleys in London do not present a more dreadful record of sin than does the smiling and beautiful countryside. Had this young lady who appeals for us for help gone to live in Winchester, I should never have had a fear for her. It is the 5 miles of country which makes the danger.
Jeremy Brett was constantly struggling to find the proper balance between textural accuracy and perfect dramatic form. To Nicholas Udichin of the Sherlock Holmes Journal, he exposited, "There are little changes in the series to the canon, but basically it's the Strand Magazine stories. However, I find that the people are much more emotional when you start putting flesh and blood onto them, when you get actors to play those people. When, for example, You have a girl coming in deep distress because she's been told that she's going to have to cut all her hair off, otherwise she won't get the job. The Copper Beeches, of course. Holmes's speech about being much more frightened of the countryside than of the town, little things like that are important. I discovered by reading the books that there are many things that have come out since Holmes has been dramatized that have been taken away from the book. Like, for example, the curved pipe, when in fact he had a disputatious pipe, which was a long, thin cherry wood, his meditative pipe, which was a broken-off clay pipe, a dirty, dirty little pipe, and this cliché of the deerstalker. Well, of course, he would never wear a deerstalker in London, I suddenly realized. He would only wear it if he was going to the country. That has become another image. So I decided, without doing it for effect, just to try and play the man. Somebody who only wore one in the country, who smoked cigarettes, etc. Holmes and Watson meet Miss Hunter at the Black Swan Bar in Winchester, where the young lady expresses intense confusion at the strange behavior of her employers. She recounts that some days after her arrival, she was commanded to don the blue dress, and upon presenting herself to her hosts, she was met with strange jubilation on their behalf. Then, when asked to sit in the picture window for at least an hour, Mr. Rucastle volunteered to help pass the time in a most peculiar way.
Then Mr. Rucastle, walking up and down on the other side of the room, began to tell me a series of the funniest stories I've ever listened to. Cannot imagine how comical he was. I laughed till I was quite weary. 2 days later, this same performance was gone through again. You can easily imagine, Mr. Holmes, how curious I became as to what the meaning of this extraordinary performance could be. Since my face was always turned away from the window, I became consumed with the desire to see what was going on behind my back. On the very next occasion, I managed to conceal a small piece of mirror in my hand. In the midst of my laughter, I raised my handkerchief to my eyes and was able, with a little management, to see all there was behind me.
Very, very upright man, very upright.
There was nothing.
Sure of himself. And George didn't like it.
At least that was my first impression.
Tiny bit. I'm sure the fella, he wanted to
At second glance, however, I perceived that there was a bearded man leaning against the railings which bordered our field and was looking up earnestly at the house. I lowered my handkerchief and glanced at Mrs. Rucastle, to find her eyes fixed upon me in a most searching gaze. She said nothing, but I'm convinced she divined I had a mirror in my hand. Jethro,
there's an impertinent fellow who stares up at Miss Hunter.
Oh, does he indeed? No friend of yours, Miss Hunter?
no. I know no one in these parts.
Oh, dear me, how very impertinent.
Quite intolerable.
Kindly turn around, Miss Hunter, and motion him to go away.
Surely it would be better if we took no notice.
What, and have him loitering here always? No, turn around, Miss Hunter, and wave him away. Like this.
That was a week ago. And from that time, I've not sat in the window, nor have I worn the blue dress, nor seen the man with a beard.
But something else occurred. An event. Which caused you to summon me with such urgency.
Yes. Yes. Oh, Mr. Holmes, I've never been so frightened.
Do not distress yourself, Miss Hunter. Compose yourself, and then tell us what it was.
There is a turret to the house which appears not to be inhabited at all. A door which faces that which leads into the quarters of the Tollers opens into the turret, but it is invariably locked. It was only yesterday that the chance came for me to pass beyond the door.
Miss Hunter, seeing the key left inside the lock by a careless Mr. Toller, attempted to sneak into the shuttered turret to see for herself what might be lurking behind the locked door. As she reached the top, her fears became manifest when she realized that someone was locked in the room above. Horrified, she ran back down as fast as her feet would carry her, but she soon came face to face with her employer, Mr. Rucastle.
So it was you then? I thought it must be when I saw the door open.
I'm so frightened.
Oh, my dear young lady. Oh, my dear young lady. What has frightened you, my dear young lady?
I was foolish enough to go up into the shuttered turret.
You noticed it was shuttered then?
Yes.
Photography is one of my hobbies. I've made my dark room up there. But what an observant young lady one has come upon.
It was so lonely and eerie in this dim light that I was frightened and ran out again. It's so dreadfully still in here.
Only that?
Why, yes. What do you think? What other reason?
Why do you think I keep that door locked?
I'm sure I don't know.
It is to keep people out who have no business there, you see.
I'm sure if I had known...
Well, you know now. And if you ever set foot across that threshold again, I'll throw you to the mastiff.
In his book, Michael Cox recalled, "Perhaps the most memorable factor in this film was the choice of the players. Carolyn Bartlett was the casting director on this particular episode, and together with Paul Annette, achieved striking success. They had to cast one of the juiciest villains in the canon, and obviously needed a major character actor. When they secured Joss Ackland for Rucastle, we all breathed a sigh of relief. The part was in the safest possible hands." Having recently seen a few other, lesser adaptations of this story, I, for one, am in complete agreement with this assessment. Ackland is simply fantastic in the role. So let's pause and take a moment to reflect on the superb actor behind Jeffro Rucastle, Mr. Joss Ackland. Born Sidney Edmund Jocelyn Ackland in 1928 in North Kensington, he was trained, like so many of the series' finest, at the Central School of Speech and Drama. His early dedication to his craft took him around the world, and he met his future wife Rosemary in the town of Pitlochry, Scotland, where they appeared together for the first time on stage. But struggling to find work as actors, they were forced to try other avenues of income. And for 6 months, Joss became a plantation manager in Kenya, growing tea. But Ackland and his wife quickly realized that such work was far too dangerous, and after 6 months, they left Kenya, eventually finding their way back to England. Ackland soon joined the Old Vic, where he appeared alongside notable actors including Maggie Smith, Judi Dench, and Tom Courtenay. And in the 1960s and 70s, he worked steadily in both film and television, notably appearing with Alec Guinness in the 1979 version of Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, and later countless film roles, including The Sicilian, Lethal Weapon 2, and The Hunt for Red October. He also famously created the role of Juan Perón in Tim Rice and Andrew Lloyd Webber's musical, Evita, where he played opposite Elaine Paige. Ackland also made a few appearances which he later regretted. In a 2001 interview, he expressed remorse for appearing in the film Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey, as well as the Pet Shop Boys music video for their song Always on My Mind, stating that he appeared purely because his grandchildren liked their music. Ackland continued working until his retirement in 2014. He remained married to Rosemary for 51 years, and together they had 7 children and 32 grandchildren. And despite his filming taking him to far-flung locations, Ackland stated that he and his wife never spent a night apart. In 1963, their house in Barnes caught fire. A pregnant Miss Ackland managed to save their 5 children, but broke her back when jumping from the bedroom window to safety. She was told she would lose the baby and would never walk again, but later gave birth, and after 2 years in the hospital, walked again. Rosemary Ackland died on July 25, 2002. Joss never remarried, but in 2009 he edited and published his wife's diaries under the title My Better Half and Me, a love affair that lasted 50 years. Joss Ackland is still with us today, at the age of 91. At the Winchester pub, Miss Hunter continues her tale.
I was so terrified that I didn't know what to do. Then I thought of you, Mr. Holmes.
I had no difficulty in getting leave to come to Winchester this morning, but I must be back by 3 o'clock, for Mr. and Mrs. Rucastle are going on a visit and will be away all evening, so that I must look after the child. Now I've told you all of my adventures, Mr. Holmes. What does it mean? And what should I do?
Does the unspeakable child Edward have a friend?
Yes, an equally unpleasant child at one of the farm cottages.
Splendid. Dr. Watson and I will arrive at the Copper Beeches at 4:30 precisely. But before then, there are 1 or 2 things I should like you to do. I would not ask this of you, Miss Hunter, if I did not think you were quite exceptional woman.
Later, seeing that the Rucastles have departed for the evening, Miss Hunter follows Holmes' instructions to the letter, and tricking Mrs. Toller into believing that young Master Edward has locked himself in the cellar, the housekeeper opens the door, only to be pushed down the stairs by Miss Hunter, who then proceeds to lock the door, trapping Miss Toller below. Meanwhile, Holmes and Watson arrive, and finding the lock on the property gate has already been cut, warily make their way across the grounds. But the mysterious bearded man has already infiltrated the Copper Beeches, and wielding a small axe, makes his way up the building side, where he smashes through into the shuttered turret, and crossing the threshold, he finds himself face to face with a red-haired young woman who looks strikingly similar to Violet Hunter. The girl screams. But the Rucastles have returned early, and seeing the broken lock at the gate, furiously storm toward the house. Our heroes race inside, and with the help of Miss Hunter, make their way up the stairs to the shuttered turret.
There's been some villainy here.
As Mr. Rucastle rushes into the turret, he calls out a name, Alice, and Holmes instructs Mrs. Hunter to hide her face from him. When Miss Hunter finally reveals herself, Mr. Rucastle becomes enraged at the deception.
Where is my daughter?
It is for me to ask you that.
His daughter? These, you spies. Thieves and spies! I've caught you, have I? Have you in my power? Just have you!
Ah, what does he mean?
He's gone for the dog.
Locking the door behind him, they are trapped, and Watson has no choice but to blast the lock with his revolver. But Rucastle makes his way to the Mastiff's cage and, attempting to loose the dog on the intruders, is instead attacked and mauled by the starved animal. In the nick of time, Watson arrives with his revolver and executes the dog before he can take Rucastle's life. Regarding this canine terror, Michael Cox recalled, "Of all the dogs in the canon, Carlo probably runs the Hound of the Baskervilles a close second for ferocity, but I have to say that the Mastiff who savages Rucastle at the climax was one of the least frightening dogs I have ever met. We provided a stand-in with protective clothing, but in the event, Joss Ackland did not require a double for the crucial scene. He had his work cut out to make a playful romp look even remotely dangerous." But while the production team were quite pleased with the casting of Joss Ackland as Rucastle, according to Michael Cox, the choice of a leading lady was not so easy. In his book, he went on to recall, "In the story, Watson says she has a bright, quick face, freckled like a plover's egg, and the brisk manner of a woman who has had her own way to make in the world. Well, they did not find anyone like that at all. Instead, they found an attractive girl with a low, musical voice and a marvelous combination of determination and vulnerability. Her name was Natasha Richardson." Born in London in 1963, Richardson was the daughter of famed actor Vanessa Redgrave and equally famed director Tony Richardson. She was educated at independent schools in London before receiving training at the Central School of Speech and Drama, and she made her film debut at the age of 4 in an uncredited role in her father's seminal film, The Charge of the Light Brigade, in 1968. Richardson began her career in earnest in regional theater at the West Yorkshire Playhouse in Leeds, and in 1984 at the Open Air Theatre, she appeared in A Midsummer Night's Dream with Ray Fiennes and Richard E. Grant. But that same year, she decided to try her hand at television, and after a small role in the 1984 miniseries Ellis Island, she auditioned for Granada Television. To David Stewart Davies, director Paul Annett recalled, "I'd suggested Natasha Richardson for the role. She was amazing. She came to the interview with Karen, a wonderful casting director, and read for us, and I was just blown away. She had Vanessa's voice, a wonderful manner, and elegance. But she had this great big nose like her poor dad, Tony Richardson. That's where it came from. When she left, I said that we'd got to have her. She was brilliant, perfect for the part. Karen agreed, but she said, 'What about the nose?' I said, 'Don't worry about it. I'll just photograph it from the front. We'll do something. I'm not too concerned, especially when she's so right for the governess.' Literally 3 weeks later, when we started the first read-through, she came in, and she hadn't got that nose anymore. She'd been to Los Angeles, had a nose job, and come back, ready to act. And she was like all the really good people. She wasn't at all vain. She just knew that she was starting a career, and she was going to be on camera with close-ups on her face, and she didn't want this big nose to get in the way. But she was so open about it, saying things like, 'Oh look, there's still a little bump there.' Jeremy was a little bit jealous of the attention she received." During the filming of the episode, she remarked, "I just hope I can measure up to the achievements of my family, but they never pushed me into acting, and I think that my mother would rather I had been a doctor or something like that." Richardson had big shoes to fill, but she jumped into the role of Violet Hunter headlong, even dyeing her blonde hair red for the part. In fact, she enjoyed the show so much that after shooting had completed, she reported that she had begun, quote, "avidly reading all the other Sherlock Holmes stories." Miss Richardson would go on to shine for many years in the worlds of film, television, and theater, even winning a Tony Award for her portrayal of Sally Bowles in the 1998 production of Cabaret. On March 16, 2009, Richardson sustained a head injury while skiing at the Mont Tremblant Resort near Montreal, from which she never recovered. 2 days later, her family issued the statement. Liam Neeson, their 2 sons, and the entire family are shocked and devastated by the tragic death of their beloved Natasha. On March 19, 2009, theater lights were dimmed on Broadway in Manhattan and in the West End of London as a mark of respect for the talented and beloved Natasha Richardson. As our tale comes to a close, the good doctor attends to Rucastle's wounds, while Mrs. Toller helps Holmes to understand the sad story of Alice Rucastle, Mr. Rucastle's daughter by his first marriage.
The mystery of the shuttered turret. Mrs. Toller, please sit down. Now, tell me all you know.
Well, she was never happy at home. Miss Alice wasn't. From the time that her father married again. She was slighted, like, and she had no say in anything. But it didn't become bad for her until after she met Mr. Fowler.
And pray, who is Mr. Fowler?
Why, he was Miss Alice's young man. You might have seen him. Hanging about. Out in the road by the field.
Yes.
And how did Mr. Fowler's involvement bring Miss Alice to her distressing circumstances?
Well, as far as I could learn, Miss Alice had rights of her own under her late mother's will. But she was so quiet and patient, she was. She never said a word about them, but just left everything in Mr. Rucastle's hands. Well, he knew he was safe with her, but when there was a chance of a husband coming forward, who would ask for all that law would give him, well, then her father thought it time to put a stop on it. He wanted her to sign a paper so that whether she married or not, he could use her money. Well, when she wouldn't do it, he kept worrying her, till she got brain fever. For 6 weeks, she was at death's door. When she got better at last, worn to a shadow and with a beautiful hair cut off, he moved her to the turret room, where she was kept, prisoner. But that didn't make no change in her young man, and he stuck to her, true as a man could be.
And then Mr. Rucastle brought Miss Hunter down from London in order to impersonate his daughter and get rid of the young man.
Well, that was it, sir. But Mr. Fowler, being a persevering gentleman, as a good sailor should be, blockaded the house.
And having met you, succeeded by certain arguments, metallic and otherwise, in convincing you that your interests were the same as his?
Mr. Fowler was a very kind-spoken, free-handed gentleman.
And in this way, he managed that your husband should not want for drink, the gates unlocked, thus ensuring that the mastiff should remain chained, and that a ladder should be ready to assist him in the rescue of Miss Alice.
You have it, sir. Just as it happened.
And thus was solved the mystery of the sinister house called the Copper Beeches. Mr. Rucastle survived, but was always a broken man, kept solely alive for the care of his devoted wife. They still live with their servants, who probably know so much of Rucastle's past that he finds it difficult to part from them. Mr. Fowler and Miss Rucastle were married by special license, and he now holds a government position on the island of Mauritius. Miss Hunter is now head of a private school in Walsall, where, I gather, she has met with considerable success. Herr Holmes, your verdict.
An admirable account, Watson.
Oh, you don't think I've put too much color and life into it?
Oh, my dear friend. I humbly defer such considerations to your excellent literary judgment. Good.
Original air date on the ITV network was August 25th, 1985, at 9 p.m. Dramatized by Bill Craig and directed by Paul Annette. Now, we came to know Paul Annette on our very first adventure, when he directed A Scandal in Bohemia, and he thrilled us with his work on the fan favorite, The Solitary Cyclist. But sadly, The Copper Beeches marks Mr. Annette's final directorial appearance on the program. But once again, he faithfully and brilliantly helms this archetypal governess in danger entry into the Granada series. To David Stewart Davies, he reflected fondly on his time with the series, sharing a particular story of traveling to the series' production headquarters in Manchester, where he met actor Jeremy Brett for the first time. He said, "I met him at the bar of the Midland Hotel, and he was just charming. What was so weird was that Dora Bryan, a famous British comedy actress, was also staying there, and she appeared at the entrance to the bar with her little dog, and saw Jeremy and greeted him like a long-lost friend. Jeremy just didn't know how to divide his attention to an old friend or his new director. It was quite funny. Then she moved off to speak to some other people. But she'd popped her dog down, and as Jeremy and I resumed our conversation, we found ourselves watching this dog. Then we saw the elevator doors open, and the dog just walked in on its own, and then the doors closed, and it was whooshed up to whatever floor. We just collapsed in laughter. It was a real icebreaker." I remember the first thing we did connected with Sherlock was going to a shop to choose pipes. Then we went to what was then a hardcore concrete base that was going to be Baker Street. It was before that very talented man Mike Grimes and his crew had set the street up. There's a picture of me and Jeremy in Peter Haining's book. We were sitting there pointing at where Baker Street was going to be, while under our breath we were saying, "They are never going to have this up in time." Neither of us really believed it would spring up as quickly as it did, but it did, and it was brilliant. In fact, Michael asked me to shoot the opening titles, which they used right to the end. The teleplay of The Copper Beeches was penned by one Mr. Bill Craig, and while Mr. Craig would only produce this single episode of the Granada series, his contributions to British television were nothing short of extraordinary. In Mr. Craig's Guardian obituary, Philip Purser wrote, "Of all the unsung writers who toiled to satisfy television's gargantuan appetite for drama in its heyday, none was more industrious or versatile than Bill Craig. Born in Glasgow in 1930, he left school at 15, worked as a newspaper copyboy, and by the 1950s was a reporter on the Scottish Daily Express. On the side, he tried his hand at writing for local theatre shows and the BBC Radio Scotland. In 1955, Craig went to London for the opportunities offered by the advent of commercial television. It was a struggle at first, but he persevered. By the 1970s, Craig was writing episodes of Thames Television's The Rivals of Sherlock Holmes, and by the 1980s, he was gracing crime series such as Bergerac and Shoestring, not to mention the adventures of Sherlock Holmes. But it was in Scottish themes that Craig made the most impact. For BBC, he dramatized The Vital Spark as well as The Borderers, and though he made his home in London, Craig always remained loyal to Scotland and would turn down lucrative network commissions if STV or BBC Scotland wanted something urgently. For STV, he initiated the first Scottish soap opera, Take the High Road. Craig was also a founding member of the Writers Guild and a dogged campaigner for authors' pension and public lending rights. Across 40 years, he turned out some 400 scripts. He had a dry wit, told good stories, and would either be smoking or embroiled in one of his perennial efforts to kick the habit. Bill Craig died on July 19th, 2002, of cancer. Audiences had to wait nearly 14 months between the Blue Carbuncle and the Copper Beeches, but the fan base of the series had continued to grow, and the second season opener netted 11.23 million viewers, its highest ratings to date, as well as an outpouring of positive reviews. To Peter Haining, David Burke recalled, "We read a particularly favorable review of the Copper Beeches in the Times. Jeremy turned to me in half-humorous consternation and said, 'You realize we shouldn't show our faces in this country for 2 years, because they'll murder us.' What he meant was that in England, people are terrified that if they praise you, you'll get terribly big-headed. So if you do succeed, they cut you down to size." He then said, "In America they believe in celebrating success, but I've gone home after a good first night in England to a boiled egg and a glass of milk." But it wasn't all so bad, as Michael Cox recalled to the editors of the Scarlet Street magazine. "I was with Jeremy in America during the launch of the second series on PBS, and it was tremendous to walk down the street in New York and see posters on all the bus stops. People would say hello to him in the street, and everywhere he went, they would congratulate him. They were very forthcoming about what they thought of the series, and usually it was complimentary, and he enjoyed that enormously." So, 34 years on, how does the Copper Beeches stand up to its predecessors? Let's find out, as we're joined by my co-conspirator, Luke. On the ladies, long hair is admired, so though Violet Hunter's inspired by the remuneration of the new situation, she tells Holmes once a bob is required. The Adventure of the Copper Beeches Limerick by Isaac Asimov.
Yo, Isaac.
So, just so everybody knows, I'm just getting over a cold, so if my throat is a little thin, that's why on this one. Okay, well, we're here recording this part of the podcast immediately after posting our interview with Stephen Fry.
Yeah.
But I was thinking maybe we'd talk about the episode first, and then we'll have a little trip report at the end where we can kind of get into our adventures abroad.
Yeah.
I don't know, does that sound right?
Yep.
So, not a lot of trivia in this one in terms of the TV show books. I kind of had to dig to find material of substance for the show, which was, I thought, a little strange because this has always, frankly, been one of my favorite episodes. Not really because of the mystery or anything, just because it's so kind of gothic horror in the way it's presented.
And the performances are pretty impeccable in this one.
Yeah, well, yeah, of course. Yeah, it's legendary level actors in this one. But actually there was, though, one little note in the books. It actually wasn't a little note. It was a lengthy explanation as to why there are no Copper Beeches in the Copper Beeches.
Oh, that was a question I had, actually.
Yeah, well, I didn't read it out in the main podcast because it's like almost 2 pages of Michael Cox talking about the budget of this episode and just episodes in general and how this costs this and that costs that. And by the time you get to that point, you got to settle on a house and you can't afford to find one with Copper Beeches.
You know what's unfortunate, though?
Yeah.
Is they roll up to the house and she turns and says Copper Beeches, and they just cut to a shot of no Copper Beeches.
Yeah, but
and then he says all dead.
Yeah.
They could have just found some Copper Beeches.
Well, that's true, and they could have just done a cutaway. Yeah, yeah, but I guess it wouldn't have been consistent. We do see the wide of the house.
Yeah, that's true.
But yeah, it is an interesting little bit of reading in that book.
I would have bought it.
Yeah, it was good that Michael Cox kind of explained why.
Yeah,
but
I was curious about that.
Yeah. I guess if we could start at the beginning, my first note is Watson's so angry at the beginning that his hair flaps because he gets so angry that he's like shaking his head when Holmes is yelling at him that he retorts.
Yeah.
And he like throws his head back and his hair is flapping around, and it's just
My first note is just the opposite. It's Watson's very first look. He comes from the window.
Yeah.
And he turns around and he's just got this look like, oh yeah, this is going to be great.
Right.
And he starts writing.
Yeah. He starts off very happy, and then he gets very dejected very quickly. And when he slams his book closed, and he's like, "It seems to me I have done you full justice in the matter."
Yeah.
And the best part about this whole sequence, other than it's completely taken right from the book, which is perfect,
Yeah.
is that they're both really angry at each other. And then when Holmes changes the topic to say all the great cases are past, and then Watson is, "Oh, surely not."
Yeah.
Just a complete change. It's almost comical.
And then Holmes hands him the note, and he just turns into like a puppy dog while Watson reads it.
Yeah. It's very sad.
Yeah.
For them for a moment.
This is I think maybe one of my very favorite just moments in all of the stories.
Which moment?
Just this interaction between the two about this. Using his pipe to accentuate the sentences.
Yeah. And he says, "You're always in a disputatious mood when you smoke that pipe."
Mm-hmm.
It's true, and that's directly from the book, that when he smokes the, long cherrywood churchwarden, that's his disputatious pipe. And when he, and then at the end of the episode, obviously he's smoking the clay pipe, the dirty clay. But that is definitely not consistent through the show, because he's almost always smoking the churchwarden, and not when he's in a disputatious mood. So
always the same, because that one gets stolen.
Well, right, it's a different pipe, but I'm just saying it's not. You know what I mean? It's not the clay pipe.
I do like that he lights it with a cinder.
Yeah,
just like from the Sidney Paget illustration.
Yeah, exactly.
Another just great piece.
Another great moment of the very beginning of the episode is that high crane shot inside of Baker Street, inside of 221B. I don't know how they managed that, frankly. It starts high in the room. I mean, I don't actually know how much of that is a set that breaks away.
I don't know either.
But you get the sense that it's not at all, and that I don't think they ever do that again. Like starting high in the corner of the room.
I don't think so,
down.
because you can see the red carpet.
Yeah,
and you don't see it very often.
But that's an impressive shot. I really like that.
Going back to, again, what's one of my favorite pieces here is the part when he talks about, what to the great unobservant public.
Yeah.
The things that, that he references that, you couldn't tell a weaver by his tooth or a compositor by his left thumb.
Yeah.
I always just thought those were funny things and never really thought that much about them. But the book has annotations.
Right.
And the thing about the weaver's tooth is that they used to, seamstresses used to cut their thread on their teeth. Yeah. And then they would eventually cut a groove into their incisors. Yeah. And some of them would chip off. Mm. And then they'd have to start using the other one.
Yeah.
Just kind of a neat touch. And I like that it was in the annotations, because sometimes they're just about dates and train records and Bradshaws and things.
Right, yeah. I've often, extolled the virtues of the HD Blu-rays and watching these in high definition. And it's just amazing the little things you can see that I never saw before I saw them in Blu-ray.
Yeah.
When they're on the train car, must have been damn cold, because you can see Holmes's breath the entire time.
Yeah. I bet with the Blu-ray you could maybe tell a weaver by his tooth, but I don't think you could tell a compositor by his left thumb, even in Blu-ray.
That's probably true, unless there was a close-up. Speaking of that train, there's one of the notes from the Leslie Klinger annotated book. In the train there, he points out that he has 7 theories that would match the facts. Mm. And Watson's like, "Oh, which one do you favor?" And but I think I mentioned this before in the Naval Treaty. He said, "You have furnished me with 7 clues."
Yeah.
But he also, in the missing 3/4, he says, "I've had 7 different schemes for getting a glimpse of the telegram." So he's the number 7 seems to be a favorite.
There's a lot of things that people say seem to be a favorite.
Yeah.
Like, violets.
Right.
Like that he collects violets.
Well, yeah.
Somebody makes the point that, like, every 10th woman was named Violet or something.
Right, yeah.
Well, I was noticing that there's 3 Violets, right?
4.
4?
Yeah.
There's been almost as many Pince-Nez in the show.
Really?
Yeah.
What do you mean?
Well, I just mean if we're pointing out things that are arbitrary.
Sure. Well, getting back to the books, the annotated books anyway, this story was published originally in June of 1892 in the Strand, and was the last of the Adventures series. And actually, Conan Doyle had thought about killing off Sherlock Holmes in this story,
right.
or at least at this point, and it was his mother, I think, sent him a letter saying...
She had an idea for a story.
Yeah, she had an idea for a story, and it was kind of this story.
Yeah.
And so he put on hold killing off Sherlock Holmes to make his mom happy. That was fun.
There's a lot of interesting notes in the Baron Gould. I don't know if they're in the Klinger. I say interesting. I mean weird. They talk about Violet Hunter being attracted to Holmes and having designs on him and also possibly being related to him.
Yeah, there's a lot of theories on that.
I don't know why there's so many theories. I feel like maybe people are reading into things.
Yeah, well, I think it's the game, quote unquote. Stephen Fry actually mentioned this to us a little bit, which I guess we'll talk about more in a bit. But there are people out there who play, the game to some Sherlockians is to find real life connections, or try to make everything into a real life connection that happens in the canon.
I think. There's fun in that game.
Sure.
But this one just seemed, I don't know, like they're reaching.
Yeah.
And I mean, because he says at one point, I'd let no sister of mine take that position. That's just a saying.
Right.
They were going, maybe she is his sister.
Yeah.
But right at the beginning of their meeting, she says, I have no relation at all.
Yeah. Though I will say there is one little thing that happens in this one that makes you wonder, and it's the part at the very end where Watson says, and Holmes never even followed up with her again, or made advances on her, or something like that at the very end of the story. And it's like, well, of course, why would he?
Yeah.
But it was just kind of a strange thing for Watson to say.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I have a bunch of little notes from the books. This isn't the only dog in the canon named Carlo.
Yeah.
The spaniel in the Sussex Vampire is also named Carlo.
Right.
The smallest piece of trivia ever, but there it is.
Here's another really weird thing from the book.
Yeah.
The fact that she brings up her hair and how beautiful it is and how it's an amazing color of chestnut.
Yeah.
The annotation was about her appearance, and the reason she talked about her hair so much was to distract Holmes from looking at her face.
Oh.
Because she had freckles.
Right. Like a plover's egg.
Like a plover's egg.
Yeah. Speaking of weird, here's maybe the weirdest note I've read so far in the Klinger book. Ray Betzner in Whatever Happened to Baby Rucastle suggests that Edward Rucastle, he of abnormally large head, and Carlo, he of projecting bones, were the same person, a boy werewolf. In fact, after the shooting of Carlo, it is as if Edward had vanished.
Oh, sure.
Which is actually kind of sort of true, because in the afterword, or in the postmortem, they're like, Jeffro Rucastle lived with his wife, and blah blah blah. They don't even mention the kid ever again.
Then he is a werewolf.
He must be.
Confirmed. You heard it here second.
But speaking of Carlo, one of my favorite lines in the book, and I have to admit, I just listened to this one as a book on tape again recently, and by Stephen Fry, because I had to.
Oh, so did I.
Yeah. And one of the best lines is when Watson says, I ran up to him and I blew his brains out.
Yeah. I wrote that one down as well. Just how flippant it was.
Yeah, dogs don't get the best treatment necessarily in the canon, because I can't remember if it was, which one was it? Was it The Sign of Four or the
Old Toby? Study
in Scarlet? No, there's a point where they're trying to test some poison, and he's like, Watson, is that stray dog still outside of our house? Go grab it. And they just test the poison and the dog dies.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, I guess we know it was poison. Interesting.
Well, this is the first appearance of the Homburg hat.
Yeah.
Which I don't wear very often, but it's my favorite hat.
Yeah.
And I came to love it because of Jeremy Brett.
Yeah, it's a good hat. I don't know why you don't wear it more often, to be honest.
He has a couple in the show, but this one looks green, and I'm quite partial to green.
Yeah.
But I love tracking all the hats. And going back to what I said in The Speckled Band, when he sets things down very carefully.
Yeah.
He sets the Homburg down fairly carefully on the table, and then he just chucks his coat all the way across the room.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I've been watching from time to time the Douglas Wilmer BBC Sherlock Holmes series from 1965, and he wears a Homburg as well, which I was kind of surprised by.
I think Peter Cushing did too as well, didn't he?
Yeah, I guess maybe I shouldn't be surprised. The Douglas Wilmer series is quite a bit more on the nose, so I almost expect him to just be wearing the deerstalker in every scene.
Yeah.
But they actually do some interesting, different choices in that series. I just watched the Copper Beeches episode, and one thing they did that I actually thought was worthy of note was in it, Rucastle, while he looks exactly like the Paget illustration in the Douglas Wilmer series, he's nothing like I imagine him, so I much prefer Joss Ackland. But what they do in that episode of that show is that Rucastle's constantly snapping photos of Violet Hunter while she's like sitting in the picture window. So it's kind of like, he mentions the dark room upstairs,
Right.
and it's kind of a justification for her sitting there, but it also kind of adds a different level of creepiness that he's constantly like snapping, old photography at her, which I don't know. I thought it was a nice touch, but just different in that version of the show. But that's not the show we're covering. So
yeah, because how good was Joss Ackland?
Well, damn. I mean, I would say he's possibly the best villain in the entire series.
Yeah. I love watching this episode.
Yeah. Thieves and spies. Yeah.
I have you in my power.
Yeah. Speaking of that little moment, when Holmes and Watson break in and they're rushing up the stairs, again, HD, you can see like somebody just doused the room with smoke and fog.
Yeah.
If you watch in the dark spaces of that room, it's really thick. Like somebody just...
There's so many good things, though, to look for in this episode. I mean, if we're just doing that, when Violet goes up the stairs and the bird flaps in her face,
right,
you can just see the guy's hand just pushing a bird into her face.
yeah.
It's funny. Yeah. I mean, I love it. And like Holmes, just something I hadn't noticed until just rewatching. But when they run outside for the dog, if you watch when Holmes comes out the door, he just jumps over.
Yeah. Yeah, he jumps over the different direction. He's like, he's trying to get closer faster.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jumps over the railing, though. It's pretty great.
Yeah.
Just so physical in this episode, too. There's another scene when Holmes and Watson first get to the house. They run up, and then Jeremy just, like, grabs the fence and puts his foot up on the fence all in one motion and just has a pose.
Yeah.
Like, if you go back and watch it, it's great. He just, it's like posing for a picture. It's just, it's amazing.
It's pretty neat. One of my favorite little moments that it's kind of not in the story, and I thought it was just completely perfect and brilliant and done as good as it could have been done, is when Rucastle comes up to the attic and Holmes turns Violet Hunter's face away, and there's just that little moment where he's not sure if it's his daughter or not.
Mm-hmm.
That's not in the story.
Right.
And damn, that's perfect. That's just a great little moment.
Stuff like that. Stuff like when Rucastle is talking to Violet, and she sees Mr. Fowler over her shoulder.
Yeah.
And he says, "Turn around and wave him away like this."
Yeah.
Just this weird gesture.
Yeah.
Again, not in the book.
Yeah.
I don't know how you would write that in the book, but
right, which she does exactly the same.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then there are some weirder moments,
mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking more of the moment where Mrs. Toller is talking about Mr. Fowler and how he was a free-handed gentleman.
Mm-hmm.
And she's very serene when she, the book says she's very serene when she says it, but in the show it's like, well, how free-handed was he? Because Holmes looks at her like, oh my God.
Yeah, well, she says, Mr. Fowler being a persevering gentleman, as a good sailor should be. And like Holmes and Watson both look up like, whoa.
Yeah, that was fun.
And her young man. But what I couldn't figure out was, why does Alice scream at her young man?
Yeah, I guess drama. I mean, maybe she just wasn't... Yeah, because she doesn't scream until he's all the way through the window.
He's all the way in, and he's like... He'd been in the room for a minute.
Yeah.
The only justification I could see is dang old brain fever striking again.
Well, yeah, that would be the reason. And honestly, there's a note about brain fever, which I feel compelled to read.
Let's read it.
From the Klinger book. So Leslie Klinger puts this annotation in. He says, 7 patients in the canon are mentioned as having the disease brain fever, which Alvin E. Rodin and Jack D. Kay write in The Medical Casebook of Dr. Arthur Conan Doyle, quote, "We can characterize as one which follows quickly on a severe emotional shock, which exhibits weight loss, weakness, pallor, and high fever, and which has a protracted course. Most patients recover, but insanity or death is possible." And then that's the end of the quote, but he goes on to say, "Watson seems to have frequently reported the vague affliction, to be sure, but it's one that was recorded by other 19th century writers as well. Roden and Key single out Catherine Linton in Emily Bronte's Wuthering Heights, Emma Bovary in Madame Bovary, and others. Such preponderance of brain fever in the literature of the day would seem to validate it as a medical diagnosis. Roden and Key further cite an 1892 medical textbook that lists, quote, fever as a manifestation of an hysterical reaction, as well as a modern dictionary that equates brain fever with meningitis. So I don't know, everything you could ever want to know about brain fever right there. But I guess just at that time in literature, it was kind of just a go-to thing, you know, like a dramatic, even though I guess maybe it was actually medically, clinically legit, it was kind of almost more like a dramatic
catch-all
device to use, in stories.
Brain fever. Yeah. Check it out.
Yeah. Well, let's wrap this one up. In terms of Persian Slippers, I really, truly, and sincerely love this episode. I don't know why exactly. I mean, I watched it kind of with my family just recently, and the reaction was there was no mystery. Holmes doesn't really solve anything in this one.
Yeah, it's weird though too, because like in the book, it's known that the daughter is there.
Right. It's just kind of, it's more like going through the steps and getting to the end of the story. But
seeing what's in store exactly.
Right. But the reason I like this one so much, first of all, that whole first 5 minutes of dialogue is top notch.
Yeah.
The best, Holmes and Watson ever. But just also just kind of the general gothic feel, when she's in that, going up to the shuttered turret, and there's just like those, skulls on the wall, and it just kind of has that feeling of horror. It feels like a horror movie almost.
Yeah,
it's just creepy, and Rucastle is just, my God, he's just so great, and he's
Mrs. Rucastle.
Well, yeah, let's talk about Mrs. Rucastle for a minute, because
in the story, Violet talks about it and says she's just like a non-entity.
Yeah. When I was a kid and I first saw this episode, that woman scared the crap out of me.
Yeah.
She is disturbing looking to me.
Especially when she goes to the window.
Yeah.
Because they just cut to her from underneath.
She just has like this dead face, like these like dead eyes. Yeah. And she's so creepy.
Yeah.
Yeah. But again, that really adds to the kind of horror feeling of it to me.
Yeah.
But, watching it kind of a few more times, I did start to feel like there maybe wasn't as much Holmes and Watson in it as it appears. They're in the beginning, and it's mostly Violet Hunter.
Yeah.
And the Rucastles in this one, and that's fine. But I don't know. I think going in, I expected to give this one a full 10, but just because I feel like it's maybe not as much Holmes and Watson as maybe it should be. I don't know. It's the same as the book, so it's hard to fault it.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I'm going to give it a 9.5.
Well, okay. Well, I mean, I guess I have like a weird attachment to it for like the hat, and then that opening scene, and also the ending, where Watson is, reading, he's recounting of the tale, but it's all very fact-based to benefit Holmes.
Well, and I love the fact that it is the end of the story that he's reading.
Right.
And then they kind of just tack on what would have happened if he were reading it aloud to Holmes.
Yeah.
And it's a little quirky, that little eye look that Holmes gives him at the end.
He kind of squeezes his face together.
It's a little funny-ish, but it is really great.
Well, I think, with all that in mind, and just all the fun things we already said, I think it'd be pretty close to 10. If you cut off a little bit of your hair and stuffed it down to the bottom of the Persian slipper, just one lock of hair short of a full 10 Persian slippers.
Cool. Okay, well, let's take a few minutes to give a little bit of a trip report here.
Yeah.
The reason we found ourselves in London most recently was for work on another project with which we're involved. And it was for that project that we were actually working with Stephen Fry. But as luck had it, Stephen's schedule permitted, and the good graces of everyone involved were such that we were able to secure a few minutes with him. And it was really, frankly, more than we kind of even hoped for, but it worked out really well.
Yeah, it was more than I hoped for sure. And I mean, just the fact that he agreed to do it at all, I think was great. And then he just, you asked him one question, and then he just did our job for us.
Right, which I think we knew would be the case because he's a professional.
I know, but I mean, I just sat there going like, Stephen Fry's right over there talking to us.
Yeah. There were so many other things I would have brought up if we had the time, but we did have a few minutes with him off the air where we were able to kind of quickly ping him on a few things. And we talked just briefly about the new Robert Downey Jr. Holmes film, which is happening. We also talked very briefly about his 2004 ITV project that he and Hugh Laurie tried to get off the ground, in which Stephen would have played Holmes and Laurie was to play Watson. But he said that there wasn't really much to say about it as they never got very far along with it. But I was never quite clear who was playing whom on that one when I heard about it online, so it was kind of fun to hear a little bit about that.
Yeah.
He made it pretty clear, though, that it's dead in the water, so I don't think it'll be happening. But I think it'd be fun to watch.
For sure.
I wish they would make it.
Yeah, and after we got back and we put the episode out, Stephen was nice enough to tweet it for us, which obviously helped us out hugely.
Sure, yeah.
And, got in contact briefly and said he's listening to the back catalog, which is a little bit...
unnerving. I'll have to be better about my grammar moving forward.
Yeah, me too. And maybe language and everything.
Yeah, but I mean, he was just the sweetest, gentlemanly gentleman that there is, and he was really cool to sit down with us. And I hope we get to talk to him again. I mean, actually, since then, we've been in contact with some different people who worked on the BAFTA campaign, and we'll talk more about that, I think, in the next one, because I'm trying to kind of pull some threads together. And maybe even share some of that information with Stephen and see what he has to say.
Well,
about it.
As he said, if there's an anniversary or something coming up, and there is an anniversary coming up, and it's the 25th anniversary of the end of the show.
Well, yeah, and also the 25th anniversary of his death, because he died as they were finishing trying to make the show.
Right.
Yeah, I've reached out to a couple different people to see if maybe that would help kickstart the campaign again, but we'll see. And like I said, we've been in contact with a few people, and we'll continue those conversations, I hope.
Yeah, well, I mean, we did mention it. We did talk about it on the episode with Stephen, and it's gotten a lot of views and a lot of hits on the podcast. So, I feel like the fact that it's out there again, maybe we can get more signatures, and we can kind of, do our part to help out.
Well, and I'm just going to throw this out there. I'm going to gather more data, but I really think an old-fashioned letter-writing campaign in this day and age, instead of an online petition, literally all of us write 10 letters and mail them with stamps to the BAFTAs. I don't know. I wonder if that would make an impression.
Yeah.
I would like to think it would.
I have some old typewriters. They could assume it's like a ransom note or something.
Right. And they're not going to know which zip code in America it's coming from.
Yeah.
Well, we had a lot of other adventures on this trip, which I feel like we should touch on. And I'll just start. We were lucky enough to meet up with a listener named Jim, who happens to work at the British Museum. We actually read one of his notes,
Jim?
I think on the last episode. And he kind of gave us a little bit of a tour around the museum, which we'd actually never been. It's like every time we've been in London, we drive by, we want to go.
Yeah.
We've never made it happen. And we were so busy on this trip. We're just always so busy every time we go anywhere. And we only had like an hour.
Yeah.
But Jim was cool enough to kind of come out.
Gave us a little guided tour of his favorite pieces.
Yeah. And it was pretty dang neat. And
incredible.
I hope we get to go back and do it again and hang out with Jim some more. And Jim, so sorry that we were just so rushed. I mean, that's just kind of the story of our lives. We reached out to him at the last second and dropped in and had an hour, and that was it. And
but he came through, and he got to meet him, and it was cool. And then he told us the way to an occult bookstore.
That's true.
And the Alpha Pub.
Yeah, and we did visit the Museum Tavern, which
was the inspiration for the Alpha Pub.
Yeah, it's been speculated it's the inspiration for the Alpha Inn.
Based on the location, I guess.
Yeah, because Henry Baker worked at the British Museum, and this was the pub that Arthur Conan Doyle, also having worked at the British Museum, would have gone and visited, and it's literally across the street from the museum entrance. And so, yeah, we went in there and had a pint.
We tried to buy a goose, and they did not have any.
Yeah, they looked at us a little funny. But for anybody who followed us on Twitter while we were abroad, they probably noticed us posting photos from Baddesley Clinton, which is a National Trust property in, I think it's just outside of Warwickshire, but it's the house where they filmed
Musgrave Ritual,
and we knew that it was the exterior of the Musgrave Ritual, but it wasn't until we went inside that we realized that the whole episode was filmed there.
It was interesting though, because when we pulled up, we all thought like, this isn't big enough.
Yeah.
But then you got closer to it and it definitely was, and there's a moat, and you could see the side of the house where Holmes, comes over on the boat.
Yeah.
But then walking through the house and seeing how many things were roped off and how much stuff you weren't allowed to get to, or there was plaques and things like this, I made me wonder if they had to shoot around it. So they were using like long lenses to shoot, because some of the rooms weren't instantly recognizable from the episode.
I went back and watched it after we got home, and I got to say, it was really fun to watch it.
Yeah.
After having been there. But there's a couple of rooms that I don't know for sure were in that house, like the bedroom where Rachel sleeps. I don't know for sure that room was in that house. It was so nondescript that
she wouldn't have slept in the house, though, would she?
I'm not sure.
I thought they had like a quarter, like a separate quarters.
Maybe that's what it's supposed to be.
We were, again, I think we went there and we had an hour.
Yeah.
Which sounds like enough time to look at a house.
Yeah.
But there was so much to the grounds, and there was gardens and things. Like, we didn't even get to see the lake.
Yeah.
But the lake was there. Like, we thought maybe this was broken up into different locations, but I'm pretty sure it was all shot there.
Yeah, well, but the main stuff in the episode where they're having dinner and Brunton comes in and they're laughing at him, and then later on they're having breakfast, it's like they shoot that room from different sides.
Yeah.
So it looks like a totally different room.
Right.
But it's that one room.
There's the one big room, and there's like a fireplace in the middle.
Yeah.
Which they told us had to be moved from upstairs to downstairs, I think.
Yeah.
And there's like a big tapestry on one wall, and then it's just windows on another wall. So it looks like a different room.
With stained glass and paintings and stuff.
And the other cool thing, I mean, maybe this is why they chose that house, was all of the priest hides, they called them.
Yeah.
There was holes in the ground, and there was holes in like the top floors going down with ropes and things.
Yeah. And when you go visit, they have them kind of set up almost like Disneyland dioramas where they show like the rope.
Yeah.
They have it set up like
with a candle at the bottom, so you can see where they were.
Or a little like a loaf of bread that they would have been eating in there.
They had so much information.
Yeah.
But they didn't know that episode was shot there. They never even heard of it.
Yeah, nobody even heard of the episode, but maybe we just got a bad batch.
Maybe.
but you could spend a whole day there, and we've been to some other historical properties out there, trust properties, and I hope we get to see more and have way more time.
It's pretty far outside of London, but if you're interested in seeing a property from the episode, it's worth doing.
And there are other properties right near there that we tried to hit. Some places where
The Last Vampire
was filmed, but we just didn't have time to see them.
But we did have time to go to the Sherlock pub again.
That's true.
We should post some pictures of that as well.
Yeah, we should do that. I will say, though, the one thing I'm kicking myself about is we should have asked somebody if we could see that little doorway where they ride the boat across, because I kind of really doubt that it led down to the actual, you know what I mean? Like, I
think it did.
I don't know.
Because it was in the same side of the house where the first priest hide was.
I just feel like that little area, when you watch the episode, it's just four walls.
I know, but remember when we came in the front door, there was a whole piece that we didn't even look at.
Yeah, I know.
And I think that's right where it was. I don't know. I'm pretty convinced that it was the same.
Well, I'd be happy to go back there again.
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens. But, we hit the Sherlock Holmes pub again, and I'm trying to think of anything else Sherlockian that we did while we were out there. We actually...
I'm just going to say one thing in case anyone hasn't been to the Sherlock pub. We ate a variety of food on this trip, from value meals to meals that were way too expensive for us. And I think the best thing I had on that whole trip was the fried halloumi at the Sherlock pub. If you get a chance, do check it out.
Yes. They're not paying us to say that.
No.
Yeah, that was...
They could pay us in halloumi, though.
The couple times we've eaten there, I've been pretty pleased with the food. I mean, for a pub, it's pretty good.
Yeah. Yorkshire pudding. That was my first Yorkshire pudding. Yeah. And halloumi is cheese, by the way.
Yeah. Well, there is one other little story I felt like maybe it'd be fun to share. And that was, again, due to the work that we were there doing, we were able to have a dinner with Sir Trevor Nunn, who is kind of a legendary theater director, known for many plays, including Cats and Les Mis, and he's the first one who directed those plays.
And he's done every
Shakespeare play.
The only person who's done every Shakespeare play.
Yeah. And we happened to be having dinner with him, and I kind of just off the cuff asked him if he had ever worked with Jeremy Brett, and he hadn't, but he had met him a few times, and he kind of reflected on it and just said, he felt like he was in the presence of royalty, and felt like Jeremy was from another generation, but was always in awe when he was around him. But he did have another interesting story that kind of ties into Sherlockiana, if that's a word.
Sherlockicana?
Yeah. I think it was about 10 years ago, he was casting a version of Hamlet, and he was very excited to do this version of Hamlet because he wanted to, for the first time, do one that was kind of accurate to the age of Hamlet, which no one ever seems to do. It's always a 40-year-old Hamlet, when in fact, it's pretty clear if you read the play that he's supposed to be, a 20-year-old student who's, at university or whatnot. And so when he was casting it, the role of Hamlet came down to two actors. One was Ben Whishaw, and the other one was Ben Cumberbatch. And in the end, he had to call Ben Cumberbatch and tell him that he thought he just looked a little too old for the role.
He said, "You'll never hear this again."
That's right. And so, yeah, Ben Whishaw, who, of course, ended up winning quite a few awards since then. But
Cumberbatch did all right, too.
Cumberbatch ended up doing all right. But he's a great guy. I really like Trevor. He's a really sweet man, and he's been very generous to us as well in the past. So overall, pretty dang good trip.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of great moments and fun times. And I hope we get to go back. I hope we find ourselves back in the UK soon. And honestly, if David Burke were to come through, or Michael Cox, I think I'd be willing to drop everything and go and spend a few minutes with them.
There was one more piece to the adventure that we didn't mention, and people, I don't think, will believe this. We didn't do it ourselves, and we didn't do it ourselves the first time, but we have wrecked another Mercedes rental van. We were driven into while we were on the road. Same side of the van, same exact model of the van.
Yeah.
We will wreck those vans anytime you give us a chance.
Yeah. And each time it's been a brand new, previously undriven.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We will break them in free of charge.
Yeah, that's right. Well, we started recording this podcast before the Stephen Fry episode went out, as I mentioned. But since then, we've actually received quite a few emails and comments and
tweets and just more than we're used to.
Yeah, and it's been really, really great.
Yeah, it's amazing. But thank you all for taking the time to write in.
Yeah, and we'll get to more of them. We have a good bucket full now, so we'll be able to reply to more.
And we'll try to, if you've said something on Twitter, we'll get to that as well.
Yeah. But just to get us started here, I have an email that came in from Andrew. He writes, "Dear Gus and Luke, as an avid Sherlockian, and in particular a fan of Jeremy Brett's interpretation, you can imagine my glee when I chanced upon your podcast. However, having loved your episode on the Blue Carbuncle, I couldn't help but feel you missed an opportunity in not doing a career retrospective on Frank Middlemass. While I appreciate your logic that there is a wealth of great cameos from established actors in that particular episode, I nevertheless feel that Frank Middlemass's portrayal of Henry Baker stands out. It also would have led to an interesting piece of Sherlock trivia. In the 1968 TV series starring Peter Cushing as Sherlock Holmes, a younger Frank Middlemass makes an appearance in The Blue Carbuncle, playing none other than Peterson, the commissionaire. Needless to say, he turns in an excellent performance, but I feel it's not until the Granada series that he finds his true calling as Henry Baker that will forever earn him a place in our hearts. You know, I tend to agree, and I kind of regretted, especially after he was singled out by Stephen Fry, that we didn't give Mr. Middlemass a longer moment in the sun. So I thought we might take just a quick moment here to remember this fine actor and read a little bit from his Guardian obituary. The acting persona of Frank Middlemass epitomized everyone's favorite uncle, avuncular, sometimes a little dotty, but essentially decent. With him around, you had the impression that humanity had not entirely given up on benevolence. Middlemass was born in Eaglecliff, on the Yorkshire-Durham border, and educated at Stockton-on-Tees. He began acting in 1949 after a short but distinguished Army career, during which he was wounded at Dunkirk and rose to the rank of lieutenant colonel. But he was starstruck from an early age, and since he was also a talented artist, his portraits of leading ladies staying at the Station Hotel, Newcastle, regularly found their way into the local newspaper. Age refused to diminish him. At 84, he was still touring. Popular and gregarious, Middlemass never married. Offstage, he was extremely generous, and according to his close friend Gareth Armstrong, the two values Frank rated most highly were loyalty and silliness. Loyal he certainly was. Needing somewhere to stay in London in the mid-60s, he asked the actor Geoffrey Toone if he could borrow his spare room for a couple of weeks. 40 years later, he was still there, and to their general amusement, they were often mistaken for an item. They never were. Frank Middlemass, actor, born May 28, 1919, died September 8, 2006, at the age of 87. So yeah, I'm glad we got to give a few extra minutes to our favorite Henry Baker, so thanks, Andrew, for writing in.
Yeah, and at least there was fewer people to really focus on in this episode, so we could give him some time.
Yeah. So we got another email from Mohammed. He wrote in to say, awesome podcast for the only depiction of Sherlock Holmes that matters. Just finished episode 2, The Dancing Men, and you guys said the 5 Orange Pips was the only other story in which a client of Holmes dies. He says, doesn't Blessington die in The Resident Patient? I wrote him back and said, yeah, but...
he wasn't a client.
He wasn't actually the client. Yeah, it was Percy Trevelyan.
Yeah.
And I believe I was quoting we were quoting a book when we read that. You know what I mean? I was quoting from the Leslie Klinger. So
right. So Leslie Klinger said it, not us.
Right. But just to clarify, yeah, I think we can safely say that Blessington wasn't actually the client in that one.
Yeah, but you know, one thing I was going to say, just because I've been, I tend to monitor the Twitter and the YouTube things, and there's been a lot of people writing and just going, I forgot all about Jeremy Brett because of this new episode, you know.
Yeah. And
just falling in love with it all over again, and people, you know, getting their DVDs out or going out and buying copies. I've actually got a friend in the UK, Doug, who just wrote me yesterday saying he bought all of the episodes to watch over Christmas.
Oh, cool.
Just because of, I mean, basically hearing Stephen Fry talk about him,
right.
They go, oh, holy crap, I love that guy.
Yeah, and in case I forget to mention it, it is on BritBox now.
Yeah. And
I think it just came on to BritBox either right before or right after we did the interview.
It was on before. I forgot about it, but I remembered really looking for it on iTunes because I wanted to have them on my phone. You know, I wanted to be able to watch them wherever. So
well, and I honestly can't keep track of the streaming services anymore. But like I was on Amazon Prime the other day, and The Adventures came up, but I didn't even click on it. But I don't even know. You know what I mean? Sometimes you click on it and it'll say you can't watch this.
It's because it's on BritBox.
Yeah.
Because I mean, for people again not in America. I hadn't heard of BritBox until I was looking for QI.
Yeah. And
then I wasn't also just looking for Sherlock, so I didn't know that it was on there.
Right. Well, we'll talk more about BritBox at some point. So here's another email. We got a very nice note from a gentleman named Will in the UK. He wrote, I had to write to thank and congratulate you on your podcasts and the wealth of supporting information that you add. I was also glad that you're acknowledging Patrick Gowers. I have the soundtrack CD, but also the original vinyl record, of which he was kind enough to attach a few photos in the liner notes. you're both exceptionally good at spotting details, so I'm guessing that you have spotted the mysterious sound boom jutting out from one of the windows in the cover image of both the original record and the CD. Well, I'm just going to interrupt right there and say I actually had not ever caught this, so good I will, but I will say that on the CD, it's really small.
Oh, yeah.
It's like you'd have to have a magnifying glass to see it.
I actually haven't seen the cover, so.
Yeah. Well, maybe we can post a photo. Will actually sent us some screenshots, and he did an enlargement. So let's definitely post that photo.
We'll put that on our Twitter.
Yeah, it's fun.
Sherlock Pod, if you haven't found us.
Will goes on to say, in the age before the internet, mobile phones, and email, the original vinyl record had a note on the inside sleeve saying, "The official souvenir brochure of the series, 48 pages in full color, is available direct from the publishers at £3.50, including postage and packing. As a fan, I'm appalled that I didn't spot this and order a copy. I wonder what it was." Well, I'll interject again right here. I've not been able to 100% confirm this, but I did do some research into this, and I believe that this souvenir brochure is almost certainly the exact same booklet as the one you can purchase, if you can find it, called 1987 Granada Companion No. 1, a Sherlock Holmes album by Kenneth Harris. And I have it here, and it's the same publisher as the brochure. It's almost the same number of pages listed on the record. And just by the look of it, I was always struck by the strange cover of this book, and it's just kind of a weird little pamphlet of a book. Like, where would you sell this? It's like a magazine,
yeah,
but thicker and glossy paper, and it's got like a foreword by Vincent Price, who used to host the Granada series in America, and there's a little article by Jeremy Brett, which I've quoted on the show before. And then it just kind of shows pictures of the different women in the series, the different villains in the series. I don't know. Maybe we'll do a little video review of this book so people can actually see what it looks like and decide, if they want to pick it up. But it can be hard to find, and it can be expensive. I mean, I've seen them online ranging from $5 to $200. And the first time I bought it, I think I paid $20 because it was the only one I could find at the time, and it got stolen when we were in London, actually, on that trip. I had it in my bag for some reason. And then I bought it again, and the copy that I have here is actually, it's kind of water damaged, but I got it for like $5 on eBay.
Yeah.
So it might even be easier to find in the UK. But if you're a fan of the show, there's not a lot of, this is kind of the closest thing to a mass-produced, lots of pictures and things from the show and a nice glossy.
If you are a fan of stuff like that and you wish you had it, one thing you could do is start a podcast with your brother and then let him buy it all, and then you can look at it.
Right, exactly. So finally, Will says, I read on the internet that Rosalie Williams, our hero Brett, and Gowers were the only people that appeared in all 41 episodes. I'm guessing that's true? ? With very best regards from just outside London, Will. I don't think Miss Hudson is in all the episodes, is she?
No.
Yeah, she's almost certainly not.
No.
I can't think of which one she's not in off the top of my head.
She wasn't in this one.
Oh, I guess you're right. Well, there you go. Yeah, I'm not sure how many she wasn't in. She's in them way more later.
Yeah, I think she's a lot.
It's kind of like they make excuses to have her in it.
Well, they did, and Jeremy said that.
Right. So another email here. Actually, this isn't an email as much as it is some comments from our website, sherlockpodcast.com. Mary went on to post a number of great comments on almost all the episodes, but I just wanted to share one or two of them here. She wrote, "One thing I've appreciated about the Granada series in general, in the way it portrayed women, is that all women are made to look like illustrations from the period and adhere to the beauty standards of the Victorian era, even Violet Smith, who is supposed to be a strikingly lovely woman. There's no attempt to try and make women meet the beauty standards of the contemporary era, and that's why the appearance of these episodes doesn't look dated at all."
I agree with that.
Yeah, totally.
If it looks dated, it looks Victorian.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Or Edwardian.
I just watched the 2002, it was like a pilot movie with James Darcy as Sherlock and
Richard E. Grant?
Richard E. Grant as Mycroft and Vincent D'Onofrio as Moriarty.
Yeah.
And that one was...
different?
It was exactly this. It was people with their haircuts from today
Yeah.
And, the makeup from today and barely even cleaning off a street in London to make it look period correct. It just...
Well, different standards, and I think the Granada series, they just got a lot of things right.
Well, they tried really hard.
Well, that's what I mean.
They built Baker Street.
Right. I guess it's not they got things right. It's that they said we're not doing it unless we do it this way.
Right, exactly.
And a lot of times you can't do that, or some people don't do that.
Right, yeah. And for anybody interested in watching that thing from 2002, I cannot in good conscience recommend it. But
you can watch it.
It's an oddity, and Richard E. Grant is always great, but we'll get to that later. Okay, so Mary goes on to say about The Crooked Man, I think I liked this episode more than both of you, partially because of the supporting cast. My heart absolutely breaks in two when Henry Wood says, it was for my good looks that Nancy loved me. I'll just intersect it right there. It's, that line is, it's perfect. It's beyond anything. It's
well,
great.
I think, we're comparing them to other greatness.
Yeah, exactly. So, that's the thing. Not everything can be...
Not everything... it can't all be the greatest. That's the only thing.
She says, it's almost a throwaway line on the page, but I can still hear it now in my head because of the actor. Ditto on the way he says, Nancy, at the end. What bothers me most about the story is that nothing is done, not by Holmes or Watson, nor by Nancy, to help Henry Wood at the end. It seems a bit out of character for all of them. Some money, assistance, something. I like to believe that, they did something after the fact.
They got him a burger.
Yeah, after the cameras stopped rolling. They probably gave him a new crutch. And then I'll read this other one by Mary. On The Speckled Band, she says, what I love so much about this story is its psychologically accurate portrayal of an abusive man who has his entire household in a state of terror, and the women around him constantly hide his behaviors and even make excuses while they suffer. It's terrifyingly realistic psychologically, and for that, I and generations of readers and viewers are willing to forgive milk-drinking trained snakes who apparently don't need air holes to breathe in safes. So, yeah, all valid points, and I'm glad you wrote them in, Mary. Thanks.
Holmes the busybody.
Yeah. So Scott wrote in to say, greetings, I'm enjoying the podcast. A person you might want to try and interview who seems very amenable to such things would be Richard E. Grant, as he's played Mycroft, and personally would be my pick to play Holmes if they redid the show traditionally. Keep up the good work.
Unless he hears this one where we say don't watch his movie.
Well, I did say that he was good in it. He's always good in it, and I don't think he'd take it personally. I would love to interview Richard Grant. He did an interview with Edward Hardwicke. He was doing a series. I don't know exactly what the series was. He himself sat down and interviewed Edward Hardwicke about playing Watson.
Well, there'd be a number of reasons that'd be fascinating to talk to him, but...
Yeah. Well, if we got him, I don't know that I'd be able to resist spending the entire time talking about Withnell and I.
Yeah.
Because he's like mythical in that role. But I like Richard Grant. Thanks for writing in, Scott. We'll see what happens. We keep trying to get David Burke, and we just haven't been able to make it happen yet.
Well, we keep trying.
We'll keep trying, and maybe somebody out there will know him and put in a good word for us. And I don't actually know. We've been going to London a lot lately, but I don't know that that's going to continue. So we'll see when the next time we're there is. But
well, this episode is getting very long.
Yes, it is. So let's go ahead and sign off. And just once again, wanted to thank everyone, Stephen Fry, and everyone who's been listening to the show and who has found us through Twitter or YouTube, and everyone who's liked and subscribed and found the podcast. Really happy that you're all with us, and hope to hear from many of you as we move into the future.
Go buy those Jeremy Brett Blu-rays.
Yes.
Or BritBox.
Or watch on BritBox.
You can watch them on YouTube, but they're not very good quality.
All right, well, we've made it through the Copper Beeches. Just a quick welcome to our new friends, followers, and subscribers out there. And thank you to all of our listeners for taking this journey with us. Please remember to like and subscribe on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also find us on Twitter at twitter.com/SherlockPod. And if you'd like to share your thoughts about any of the topics we've covered, please drop us a line at contact@SherlockPodcast.com. And if you'd like to help us keep the lights on here, we have a Patreon account where we are planning to add more additional content soon. So please consider joining us there at patreon.com/Sherlock Podcast. Next time, we meet Brother Mycroft as we examine the mystery of the Greek interpreter. See you then.